The large screen in the United Earth Coalition headquarters showed the massive alien ship entering Earth's orbit. It was the third visit from the Voraxians since first contact 6 months ago. John Miller straightened his tie and took a deep breath. As lead diplomat, it was his job to make sure these meetings went well. "They're early," said Lisa Carter, standing beside him. The archaeologists have been added to the diplomatic team after the second meeting. While others brought advanced technology to show the aliens, Lisa brought ancient stone tools and artifacts. John thought it was strange, but she insisted. The Voraxian delegation entered the room. Their tall, slender bodies moved with unusual grace. Their skin shimmered with a metallic blue glow under the lights. The leader, Ambassador Krivor, extended 4 of his 6 limbs in their traditional greeting. "We come again to observe your progress," Krivor said through the translator device. His large, pupil-less eyes scanned the room. "We hope you have prepared more interesting displays than last time." John smiled politely despite the insult. "We're excited to show you our latest advancements. Our scientists have been working day and night." The meeting moved to the display hall. Earth scientists proudly showed off their newest technologies. There was a fusion reactor smaller than a car engine. A doctor demonstrated medical nanobots that could repair damaged organs. An engineer presented a quantum computer that could solve problems previous computers needed years to calculate. With each display, the Voraxians looked less impressed. Sometimes they made clicking sounds that the translator didn't catch, but their body language made it clear they were laughing. "This is what you call advanced?" Krivor asked, holding up the quantum processor. "Our children play with more complex devices." One of the other Voraxians added, "Your tools are so primitive. You rely on metals and electricity. How do you expect to join galactic society with such basic technology?" John felt his face grow hot, but he kept his diplomatic smile. "We're learning and growing every day. Perhaps you could share some of your technology to help us advance faster." The aliens made that clicking sound again. "That would be like giving a stone axe to an infant," Krivor said. "You are not ready." Lisa stepped forward with her display case. "I'd like to show you something different." She opened the case to reveal stone tools arranged by age. "These are tools our ancestors made. The oldest is from over 2 million years ago." The Voraxians leaned in, suddenly interested. Lisa picked up a hand axe made of flint. This simple tool helped humans survive for thousands of years. When she offered it to Krivor, the alien hesitated before taking it. John noticed something strange, a slight tremor in the alien's limbs. Krivor quickly handed it back. "Quaint," he said, but his voice sounded different. "You keep remnants of your primitive past." "We value our history," Lisa replied. "These simple tools are part of who we are." The meeting ended soon after. As the Voraxians left, John overheard 2 of them speaking. The translator caught fragments: "stone users" and "potential problem," and "reassess threat level." Later, John found Lisa in her office studying the flint axe. "You noticed it too, right?" she asked without looking up. "Noticed what?" "How they reacted to the stone tools. They were disgusted by our advanced technology, but afraid of these." She held up the axe. "Afraid?" "They seemed amused to me." Lisa shook her head. That wasn't amusement. When Ambassador Krivor held this flint axe, his bio readings spiked. "I was monitoring them." She pointed to a small device on her desk. His heart rate equivalent doubled. His body temperature dropped. Classic fear response. John sat down, confused. Why would advanced aliens fear stone tools? "I don't know yet," Lisa said, carefully placing the axe back in its case. "But I'm going to find out. Because if these powerful aliens have a weakness, we need to know what it is." "You think they'll become a threat?" Lisa looked at him seriously. "John, they already are. They're just waiting for the right moment to show it." 6 months after the last diplomatic meeting, the sky filled with Voraxian ships. They came without warning in the early morning. The first blast hit New York City, destroying half of Manhattan in seconds. The second hit Beijing. The third hit London. John Miller watched the attacks on the emergency broadcast as he was rushed to a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. His driver barely spoke, focused on the road as military jets screamed overhead. "What about Lisa Carter?" John asked. "We're picking her up next," the driver said. "She's on the priority list." The car swerved off the main road and headed toward the university where Lisa worked. They found her in her office, frantically packing artifacts into a special case. "We need to go now," John said from the doorway. Lisa nodded but didn't stop packing. "I need these. Trust me." The stone tools and artifacts were loaded into the car, and they sped toward the mountain facility. Above them, human fighter jets engaged the alien ships. The jets exploded one after another, their weapons useless against Voraxian shields. "I tried to warn them," John said quietly. "After your observations, I filed reports. Nobody believed me." "They didn't want to believe," Lisa replied, clutching her case of artifacts. "It's easier to think advanced aliens would be peaceful." The mountain facility was chaos when they arrived. Military personnel rushed about. Screens showed battles from around the world, and the outcome was always the same. Human weapons failed. Cities fell. People died. General Alan Ward met them at the entrance to the command center. His face was grim. "The president is dead. Most of the cabinet, too. I'm the highest-ranking official in contact with our remaining forces." "What's our plan?" John asked. "Plan?" The general laughed bitterly. "Our missiles bounce off their shields. Our lasers don't even leave a mark. We have no plan." Lisa stepped forward. "I might have something." The general looked at her with doubt. "You're the archaeologist, right? Unless you've got an ancient superweapon in that case, I don't see how you can help." "Not a weapon," Lisa said, "but maybe the key to one." They set up a lab for Lisa in one of the smaller rooms. John helped her unpack the stone artifacts, while screens around them showed the world falling apart. A message cut through all broadcasts. The face of a Voraxian appeared on every screen. Unlike the diplomats, this one wore ornate armor with glowing symbols. "People of Earth, I am High Marshal Zix Tor of the Voraxian Empire. Your planet is now under our control. Resistance will bring death. Surrender will bring servitude. Choose wisely." The broadcast ended. The room was silent except for the sound of Lisa arranging stones on a table. "These won't save us," the general said, pointing at the ancient tools. Before Lisa could respond, a call came in from one of the resistance groups that had formed in the chaos. A man named Frank Hudson was on the line. "General, something weird is happening here. We were hiding in some old caves with granite walls. The aliens came after us, but when they got close to the cave entrance, their weapons stopped working. They seemed scared." Lisa's head snapped up. "Where exactly are you?" Frank described the location. Lisa pulled out a geological map and traced her finger to the spot. "The rock formations there are over 2 billion years old, heavy in quartz and several rare minerals." She looked up, her eyes bright with realization. It's not just the stone tools they feared. It's something in the stone itself. John remembered how the Voraxian ambassador had trembled when holding the flint axe. "Can we use this?" "Maybe." Lisa picked up a piece of granite. "We need to understand exactly what affects them and why. We need to run tests," she continued. "And we need samples from other sites where the aliens have shown similar reactions." For the first time since the invasion began, a look of hope crossed the general's face. "I'll send teams to collect samples, and I'll get Frank Hudson and his people here with pieces of that cave." John looked at the simple stone tools on the table. The aliens had laughed at human technology, thinking their advanced weapons made them invincible. But maybe, just maybe, the oldest tools on Earth would be the key to humanity's survival. The underground lab buzzed with activity. It had been 2 weeks since Frank Hudson brought chunks of granite from his cave hideout. Lisa Carter worked tirelessly, surrounded by rock samples from around the world. Paul Martinez, a geologist with kind eyes and a quiet voice, helped her test each sample. Dr. Samantha Wright, a quantum physicist who had lost her family in the first wave of attacks, studied the readings on her specially designed equipment. "The effect is strongest in these older stones," Lisa said, holding up a piece of dark basalt, "especially ones with high quartz content." "That matches what we've seen in the field," John Miller said. He pointed to a map on the wall marked with red dots. "Every successful resistance ambush has happened near these types of formations." Frank Hudson leaned against the wall, arms crossed. His face was scared from a close encounter with a Voraxian patrol. "My people have been using arrow tips made from the cave rock. They don't penetrate the aliens' armor, but they cause their shields to flicker and die." Dr. Wright looked up from her instruments. "It's not just mechanical disruption. There's something happening at the quantum level." She pointed to a screen showing wave patterns. "These stones emit a frequency that we can't detect with our senses, but it disrupts the energy patterns the Voraxians use in their technology." "Is it hurting the aliens themselves, or just their tech?" John asked. "Both," Lisa said. "Look at this." She played a video taken by one of Frank's scouts. It showed a Voraxian soldier approaching a circle of stones. As it got closer, its movements became jerky. The glowing parts of its armor flickered. The alien backed away quickly, its limbs shaking. "Their biology and technology are connected somehow," Paul said. "These specific mineral compositions affect both." Lisa pulled out an old book from her bag. She opened it to a page showing ancient stone circles. "I think our ancestors knew about this, at least instinctively." Stone circles appear in cultures across the world, often described as protection against evil spirits or invaders from the sky. "You think the Voraxians have been here before?" Frank asked, skeptical. "I think they've sent scouts throughout our history," Lisa replied. "And I think our ancestors found ways to keep them away, without fully understanding what they were doing." Dr. Wright suddenly stood up straight, her eyes wide. "I've been analyzing the stone's effect on their technology. Their systems are based on crystalline structures fundamentally different from Earth minerals. When these structures come into contact with certain Earth stones, they experience a form of resonance that breaks down their molecular bonds." "Like an opera singer breaking glass with the right note?" John asked. "Exactly," Dr. Wright said, "but much more complex." Paul gathered several stone samples. "We need to figure out which combinations are most effective, and how to weaponize them." "Can we create synthetic versions?" Frank asked. "We've got limited natural supplies." Lisa shook her head. "I don't think so. The age of the stone matters. These rocks have been subjected to Earth's magnetic field and cosmic radiation for billions of years. That's part of what makes them effective." John walked to a table covered with ancient tools. He picked up a stone knife with strange markings etched into the blade. "What about these patterns? Many of your artifacts have similar carvings." Lisa took the knife, running her finger along the markings. "These are from different continents, different time periods, yet the patterns share mathematical similarities. I never understood why until now." Dr. Wright scanned the knife with her instruments. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. "The disruption effect is 3 times stronger where these patterns are carved." "The patterns amplify the stone's natural properties," Lisa said, excitement building in her voice. "Our ancestors discovered this through trial and error over thousands of years." Frank pushed away from the wall, suddenly interested. "So we need to find the right stones, cut them the right way, and carve the right patterns." "Yes," Lisa said. "We need to combine ancient knowledge with modern understanding." John looked at the stone tools with new respect. "The Voraxians laughed at our primitive technology. They never imagined our oldest tools would be their undoing." Dr. Wright was already sketching designs based on the ancient patterns. "We need to start production immediately. We'll need mining teams, stone cutters, and people who can etch precise patterns." Paul nodded. and we'll need to train fighters how to use them effectively. For the first time since the invasion, hope spread through the room like a tangible force. The humans had found their weapon. The abandoned quarry buzzed with activity. Just 3 weeks ago, it had been empty. Now it was the heart of Operation Stonehenge. Humans worked day and night, cutting stone and carving patterns. The air filled with dust and the sound of hammers and drills. Karen Lewis wiped sweat from her forehead as she examined a new granite block. Before the invasion, she had been a mining engineer. Now she led the extraction team. "This one has good quartz content," she said to Steve Daniels. "Should work well for the larger weapons." Steve nodded. He had been a toolmaker in a small town before the aliens came. Now he taught others how to shape stone into weapons. His hands were rough and cut from constant work, but he never complained. "The latest batch of spear points is ready," he said. "Frank's team is taking them out tonight to test against a Voraxian patrol." Across the quarry, Lisa and Dr. Wright worked with a modified laser cutter. They had discovered that combining ancient tool-making methods with modern laser etching created the most effective weapons. "The patterns need to be exact," Dr. Wright said, adjusting the laser. "Even a small error reduces the disruptive effect." Lisa checked the design on the computer screen. It matched patterns found on ancient stones from Easter Island. "Our ancestors got these right through trial and error over generations. We're lucky to have their knowledge." John Miller entered the workshop area. His diplomatic suit was long gone, replaced by practical work clothes. He carried a stone knife with an intricately carved handle. "The first field report is in," he said. "The stone-tipped arrows worked better than expected. Frank's team took down a Voraxian patrol near Boulder without losing anyone." A cheer went up from the workers. Good news was rare these days. "What about their armor?" Lisa asked. "Just like we thought. The stone disrupts their shields. The arrows didn't penetrate deeply, but the contact was enough to disable their weapons and communication systems." Karen stepped forward. "We need to scale up production. There are resistance cells all over the country asking for weapons." "The world," John corrected. "We've made contact with groups in Europe, Asia, and Africa. They're all reporting the same thing. Stone works against the Voraxians." Steve held up a stone-tipped spear. "We've come full circle. Our most advanced weapons failed, so we returned to our first weapons." "With improvements," Dr. Wright added. She showed them a stone disc etched with complex patterns. "This isn't just any stone weapon. The patterns create a resonance field that extends beyond the physical contact point. It doesn't just affect what it touches. It creates a bubble of disruption." A young messenger ran into the workshop. "They're coming. Voraxian ships, heading this way." Everyone froze for a moment. Then Karen's voice cut through the panic. "Everyone to your stations. Follow the evacuation plan." People moved quickly, but without chaos. They had prepared for this possibility. "How long do we have?" John asked the messenger. "Maybe 20 minutes. They're moving slowly, scanning the area." Lisa grabbed a case containing the most important research data. Dr. Wright collected her equipment. Steve and his team quickly packed the finished weapons. "What about the quarry?" Karen asked. "All the raw materials we've gathered." John looked around at the stones they had collected and the half-finished weapons. "They couldn't take it all. We have to leave it," he said. "But first," he picked up one of Dr. Wright's etched stone discs and placed it in the center of the quarry. Others understood and did the same with more of the etched stones, placing them in a pattern that Lisa quickly drew on a map. "If they land here, they'll get a surprise," Lisa said. The evacuation trucks were loaded within 15 minutes. As they drove away, John looked back at the quarry through binoculars. The Voraxian ships hovered above it, scanning for humans. Then one ship descended toward the quarry floor. "Should we wait to see what happens?" Karen asked from the driver's seat. "No need," Dr. Wright said with a small smile. "Physics is reliable." As if on cue, a bright flash erupted from the quarry. The Voraxian ship wobbled in the air, its lights flickering, before crashing into the stone below. Operation Stonehenge is working, John said. Now we take the fight to them. 2 months after Operation Stonehenge began, resistance cells across the world fought back with stone weapons. In the mountains of Colorado, Bill Cooper led a team of 20 fighters armed with stone-tipped spears and arrows. They moved silently through the forest toward a Voraxian outpost. Remember, Bill whispered to his team, aim for their armor joints. The stone disrupts their shields, but we still need to find weak spots. The fighters spread out around the alien structure. The Voraxians had built it on a clearing, cutting down the forest around it for visibility. They thought this made them safe. They were wrong. Bill gave the signal. 20 stone-tipped arrows flew through the air. The alien shields flickered and died when the stones made contact. The Voraxians stumbled, their movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated. The second volley of arrows found gaps in their armor. Within minutes, the outpost fell. The humans collected the alien technology that was still intact for study. Send word to headquarters, Bill told his second-in-command. Another outpost down. No casualties on our side. Similar reports came in from around the world. The stone weapons worked everywhere. The humans were winning small battles. But the Voraxians responded with brutal force. From orbit, their ships destroyed entire cities. High Marshal Zix Tor's message played on any working screens. For each outpost attacked, a human city will burn. In the main resistance base, John Miller watched the reports of destroyed cities with a heavy heart. We're hurting them, but they're killing us by the millions. Lisa Carter studied a new set of stone samples brought in from sites around the world. We need something bigger than arrows and spears. We need to hit their main ships. Dr. Wright entered the room, her eyes bright with excitement. I've made a breakthrough. She placed a small stone disc on the table. It was covered in microscopic etchings that formed spiral patterns. I used an electron microscope to etch these patterns at the microscopic level, she explained. The disruption effect is exponentially stronger. How strong? John asked. Strong enough to disable a mothership, if we can get it on board. Frank Hudson picked up the disc carefully. You mean we need to somehow get aboard one of their main ships? That's suicide. Not necessarily, Lisa said. She pulled out ancient cave drawings showing spiral patterns similar to Dr. Wright's etchings. These patterns appear in ancient art across all continents. I think they're not just decorative. They're mathematical formulas. What kind of formulas? John asked. Resonance formulas, Dr. Wright said. These patterns create standing waves that disrupt Voraxian technology at a fundamental level. And I've discovered something else. She pulled out a small spray bottle. I've ground similar etched stone into microscopic particles suspended in water. It creates an aerosol that carries the same disruptive properties. A stone virus, Lisa whispered. Exactly, Dr. Wright nodded. If we could release this inside their ventilation systems, it would spread throughout their ships, disrupting all their systems simultaneously. High Marshal Zix Tor stood on the bridge of his command ship orbiting Earth. His officers reported another lost outpost. How are these primitives defeating our advanced technology? He demanded. His science officer approached cautiously. The humans are using weapons made from their planet's stone. The mineral composition creates resonance patterns that interfere with our systems. Simple rocks cannot defeat the Voraxian Empire. Zix Tor slammed his fist on a control panel. There's more, the science officer continued. They're etching patterns into the stones that amplify the effect. Patterns that match ancient warnings in our historical archives. Zix Tor froze. The forbidden equations. Impossible. No primitive species could discover those. The evidence suggests they have, the science officer said. Perhaps not through calculation, but through trial and error over millennia. Zix Tor turned to his weapons officer. Increase orbital bombardment. Destroy every quarry, every mountain with the mineral compositions they're using. We must crush them before they fully understand what they've discovered. On Earth, the resistance leaders gathered to plan their most ambitious attack yet. They would target the Voraxian command ship itself. "We need volunteers," John said to the assembled fighters. "This will be dangerous." Hands rose throughout the room. Lisa looked at the stone disk with its spiral etchings. "They thought our stone tools were primitive jokes," she said quietly. "Now the joke's on them." The small team gathered in the hidden hangar. They stood around a captured Voraxian shuttle that resistance fighters had seized 3 weeks earlier. Dr. Wright carefully loaded containers of the stone virus into special backpacks. "Once inside the mothership, you'll need to find the main air circulation system," she explained. "Release the virus there, and it will spread throughout the ship." Mary Johnson checked her equipment one last time. Before the invasion, she had been a crop duster pilot in Kansas. Now she would fly the alien shuttle. "The controls are strange, but I've been practicing," she said. "I can get us there." John Miller and Frank Hudson would go with her. They all wore pieces of Voraxian armor taken from defeated soldiers. The armor wouldn't fool any aliens up close, but it might get them past initial security scans. Lisa handed John a small stone disc with intricate spiral patterns. "Keep this with you at all times," she said. "It will disrupt any Voraxian weapons near you. But be careful, it works both ways. Your stolen weapons won't work well either." General Ward addressed the team. "This is our one shot at their command ship. If you succeed, we may turn the tide of this war. If you fail—" "We won't fail," Frank said firmly. Mary started the shuttle's engines. They hummed with an alien sound that made the humans' teeth vibrate. The hangar doors opened to the night sky. "Good luck," Lisa said as the shuttle rose. The trip to the mothership took less than an hour. Mary flew carefully, following the path their intelligence had mapped out to avoid detection. The mothership loomed ahead, massive and threatening. "Remember, we're delivering captured humans for interrogation," John reminded them as they approached the docking bay. "That's our cover story." The docking bay controller questioned them in the alien language. Mary played the recorded response they had prepared. There was a tense moment of silence. Then the docking bay doors opened. Mary landed the shuttle among dozens of similar craft. Voraxian soldiers moved around the bay, but none paid special attention to their shuttle. "So far, so good," Frank whispered. They moved through the ship, following the plans Dr. Wright had extracted from captured Voraxian data. Twice they had to hide from patrols. Once, a Voraxian officer looked right at them, but turned away, fooled by their stolen armor. John checked the small device Lisa had given him that detected air currents. "We're getting close to the circulation hub," he said. They rounded a corner and froze. 5 Voraxian guards stood before a large door marked with alien symbols. "That's it," Mary whispered. "The main air circulation system." Frank gripped his stolen Voraxian weapon. "We can't shoot our way past them. Our weapons will fail near the stone discs we're carrying." John thought quickly. He pulled out the stone disc Lisa had given him and another smaller one from his pocket. "I have an idea." He handed one to Mary. "Create a distraction down that corridor. When the guards follow, Frank and I will slip inside." Mary nodded and moved away. Moments later, they heard a crash and alarms began to sound. The guards ran toward the noise, leaving only one at the door. Frank approached the remaining guard, pretending to be a Voraxian soldier bringing an urgent message. When he got close, he pressed the stone disc against the alien's armor. The guard's systems failed instantly, and Frank overpowered him. John and Frank entered the circulation hub. Inside, massive machines pumped air throughout the giant ship. John unloaded the stone virus containers from his backpack, while Frank stood guard. "Hurry," Frank said. "They'll figure out the distraction soon." John placed the containers in the intake vents and activated them. Fine stone dust began to spray into the air system. "Done," John said. "Let's find Mary and get out of here." But as they turned to leave, the door slid open. High Marshal Zix Tor himself stood there with a dozen guards. "Humans, he hissed through his translator. "I sensed your primitive stone weapons the moment you came aboard." The guards raised their weapons. Frank and John prepared to fight, knowing they would die here. Then a strange thing happened. The lights in the room flickered. The guard's armor began to spark. High Marshal Zix Tor stumbled, his limbs jerking strangely. "What have you done?" he demanded, his voice distorted by his failing translator. John smiled grimly. "Stone virus. It's already working." Throughout the massive ship, Voraxian technology began to fail. Weapons wouldn't fire. Shields collapsed. Communications died. And through it all, microscopic particles of etched stone floated in the air, carried by the ship's own circulation system. The stone the aliens had laughed at was now bringing down their mightiest vessel. Alarms blared throughout the Voraxian mothership. The stone virus spread through every room and corridor. Alien soldiers stumbled and fell as their armor systems failed. Control panels sparked and went dark. The ship began to drift in orbit. High Marshal Zix Tor struggled to stay upright. His ornate armor, once glowing with power, now flickered weakly. He glared at John and Frank. "You primitive creatures," he growled. "You cannot defeat the greatest empire in the galaxy with rocks." "Looks like we just did," Frank said. Mary appeared in the doorway behind the Voraxian guards. She had used the confusion to circle around and find her teammates. She carried a simple stone axe, similar to the one Lisa had shown the aliens during their first meeting. "We need to go," she said. "The ship is losing orbit. It's going to crash." John stepped closer to Zix Tor. "Call off your forces. End this invasion." The High Marshal laughed, a harsh clicking sound. "Never. We will return with ships that are immune to your stone tricks. We will burn your world to ash." "Why?" John asked. "Why attack us at all?" Zix Tor's translator glitched, but his words came through. "Your world is unique. Your stones contain minerals not found elsewhere. Once we destroy you, we will mine your planet for these minerals. The very weapons you use against us will become our greatest resource." A violent shudder ran through the ship. The floor tilted beneath their feet. "It's breaking up," Mary warned. "We have maybe 20 minutes." Frank turned to John. "We need to get to the shuttle." But John stood his ground, facing Zix Tor. "You came to steal our stones, but you didn't understand them. These aren't just minerals. They're part of our history, our evolution. We shaped them, and they shaped us." Zix Tor lunged suddenly, grabbing John's throat with one of his 6 limbs. His strength was still formidable, even with his systems failing. Frank moved quickly. He drove his stone knife into the joint of Zix Tor's armor. The High Marshal screamed and released John. Frank and John backed toward the door where Mary waited. "The command codes," Frank said. "We need them to send the stand-down order to the other ships." Zix Tor clutched his wounded limb. "I will die before surrendering." "You'll die either way," John said. "But your people don't have to." Something changed in the alien's eyes. Perhaps it was respect, or simply the acceptance of defeat. He spoke a series of harsh sounds that the ship's computer recognized. A control panel lit up nearby. "The command channel is open," Zix Tor said. "But I will not give the order." John stepped to the panel. "You don't have to." He pressed the stone disk against the alien technology. Instead of shutting it down, the disk merged with the system. The patterns etched in the stone created a signal that broadcast to all Voraxian ships. Dr. Wright said this might work, John explained to his surprised companions. The same patterns that disrupt their tech can also send a specific command signal. On screens around the room, they saw Voraxian ships powering down weapons. Some began to move away from Earth, retreating to space. The mothership lurched again, more violently. "Time to go," Mary said. They ran through failing corridors, past confused aliens, to reach their shuttle. Mary started the engines just as the mothership began to break apart. They flew out of the docking bay moments before it collapsed. From a safe distance, they watched the massive ship enter Earth's atmosphere. It burned brightly as it fell, eventually crashing into the Nevada desert with an impact felt hundreds of miles away. 3 days later, resistance leaders gathered at the main base. Reports came in from around the world. The Voraxian forces were in retreat. Some ships had crashed when the stone virus reached them through communication channels. Others fled into deep space. Lisa Carter stood with John and the others as General Ward made the announcement. The invasion is over. We've won. Cheers erupted throughout the base. People hugged and cried. After months of fighting, after millions of deaths, Earth was free again. Later, John found Lisa studying the fragments of Voraxian technology they had recovered. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She looked up, her eyes bright with purpose. "I'm thinking about the future. The aliens will be back someday. We need to be ready. More stone weapons." Lisa smiled. "No, something better. A combination of their technology and our stones. They came to steal what makes Earth special. Instead, they gave us the key to the stars." John looked at the stone disk in his hand, the spiral patterns catching the light. The aliens had laughed at human tools, never imagining that the simplest of those tools would lead to their defeat. Humanity had survived, and in doing so, had discovered their greatest strength, the wisdom to value both their past and their future.